Tensions continue to rise over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. A third round of talks between delegates from both countries is taking place today. This as the U.S. proceeds to weigh its involvement. Kurt Volker, a former U.S. ambassador to NATO, had this to say regarding a possible no-fly zone over Ukraine.
We make clear to the Russian military that we will not strike their aircraft or their helicopters as long as they stay outside the zone. And then there are rules of engagement that our Air Force and others are very good at, of escorting people out of a zone without fire if they're not fired upon. And I think we apply all of those things in order to try to create a safe space for the civilians.
So Weijia Jiang is at the White House now with the latest on how Washington is reacting. Weijia, thanks for joining us. So in terms of Congress, we have some bipartisan support. Congress hasn't been able to work together on a lot of things, but they seem to be coming together over the response to Ukraine. Congress is hoping to pass a multi-billion-dollar aid package for Ukraine. What more do we know about the money and what the money will be used for?
So good morning, Anne-Marie. Good morning to everybody. The White House put in this formal request last week for $10 billion. A lot of it would be to offer humanitarian aid and more military support. And we know that this money is attached to a much broader bill to keep the government funded because funding runs out at midnight on Saturday. And so it does look like there is a new sense of urgency to push this through, to get this passed, because you're right, there is support on both sides of the aisle to help Ukraine as much as we can, short of getting involved directly, which is what we just heard from Mr. Volker there. So there's also bipartisan support for sending more fighter jets to Ukraine. You know, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle, as well as President Biden, have long said that despite what we just heard, that there are rules of engagement. You know, they worry that Russia's not going to follow any of those rules. So if you put U.S. planes in the sky to enforce a no-fly zone, that would ultimately lead to having to strike down some Russian aircraft, as an example, and they worry that could lead to World War III. So it's something that the president is not going to engage on, at least for now. It's hard to see him changing his mind there, but it's very different to send more supplies, send more fighter jets to Ukraine to allow them to defend itself. And that is something that they are also supporting now. And so we are seeing a rare moment here of lawmakers from both sides coming together, again, to help those civilians that we are seeing from Ukraine.
Lawmakers have also been calling for an embargo of Russian oil. It's something that it seemed like the president was not that interested in pursuing initially, but maybe weighing options now. We don't buy a lot of oil from Russia, so it seems like on the surface it would be a no-brainer, but what are the concerns?
Well, the U.S. is trying to coordinate everything, all of its moves, with its European allies. And you're right about the fact that Europe purchases a lot more oil from Russia than the U.S., but it certainly would send a strong signal. And it isn't a lot, but it is, you know, the White House says anytime you cut down supply, even if it is not large amounts in comparison to where we get oil from other places, you know, that's going to drive the price up because the demand remains the same. And so the president has been very hesitant to do this so far. But because of this bipartisan drumbeat to ban Russian oil, the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, just said yesterday that the administration is reviewing options, how to do it with the least financial impact to Americans. Although even if it is just a little, you know, you've been covering the gas prices around the country, even a little is a lot for people who are already paying so much more for their gas. So I wouldn't be surprised if some sort of embargo comes through. In fact, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said she was introducing a new bill that would do just that. And there seems to be a lot of support from both sides to get that passed.
The State Department is urging Americans in Russia to leave now. If they don't get out in time, what is the State Department prepared to do? What do we know about those plans?
Well, we know that some Americans are detained, have been detained. In fact, we just learned over the weekend that WNBA star and Olympic medalist Brittany Griner was detained last month and is still in Russian custody. So that is one example of how the U.S. Embassy is trying to work to get detained Americans out. As for other people who are just trying to find something as simple as a flight, the State Department continues to work with them. But, you know, their message is to leave as soon as you can, but they also point out the fact that for months now they've been saying don't go there in the first place. And so we are seeing people come back, but whether they face tougher challenges down the road, the State Department says they are committed to helping those people get out as quickly as possible. Of course, those in Ukraine have a much tougher road ahead.
Yeah, very, very much the case. Weijia, thank you very much.
Sure.